Director's cuts are nothing new. One of the earliest examples of a filmmaker recutting and repurposing their original film is Charlie Chaplin, who re-released his 1925 silent film The Gold Rush almost 20 years later, now with voiceover and sounds. Over the decades, many directors were able to re-edit their films to more closely adhere to their original vision, more often than not due to studio meddling and fear of underperforming at the box office. Orson Welles famously had many problems with studios he worked with. His film The Magnificent Ambersons losing over 30 minutes of footage after preview audiences didn't like it, and his 1958 masterpiece, Touch of Evil, being released in its original version only at the end of the 20th century, a decade after Welles died. Other directors have been luckier with getting extended cuts released, more famously Ridley Scott, who has a new, longer version of almost every movie he has made, from Alien and Blade Runner to The Gladiator and the underrated Kingdom of Heaven. Another director who became famous for their new cuts is Zack Snyder. Of the 8 films that he has directed, only 3 have not received a makeover version. Dawn of the Dead had an unrated version that added more gore and character development. Watchmen was released twice over, with the director's cut adding 24 minutes of footage, while the ultimate cut reaches 3.5-hour running time, adding a whole new animated short film, The Black Fighter. The extended cut of Sucker Punch added much needed depth to the film, especially in a key scene featuring John Hamm that is a highlight in the story. And Batman v Superman's Ultimate Edition fixed some of the problems with the theatrical version and restored the film to its grittier R rating. Finally, we get to Justice League. Snyder had a terrible tragedy hit him while finishing work on the film, and Warner Brothers took advantage of this situation to remove him from the project and bringing in Joss Whedon to tighten the excessive runtime to a more audience-friendly 2 hours. Whedon ended up reshooting a large portion of the film, changing the overall structure, inserting more comedic, quippy moments, and removing key character scenes.
You should get out. Can you at least point me to Atlantis?
When the film was released in 2017, it garnered overwhelmingly negative reviews and failed to do an impression at the box office, performing worse than any other film in a DC extended universe. After plenty of teasing from Zack Snyder and aggressively overwhelming behavior from the fans clamoring to release the Snyder Cut, a deal between HBO Max and Warner Brothers made it possible for the director to go back, finish post-production on his original version, and film a couple of extra scenes. After a long year of waiting, we officially received Zack Snyder's Justice League, and it is an incredibly fascinating beast. Often, when studios interfere in the production or post-production of a film, we hear directors talk about what they originally wanted to do and what got changed, at most being able to show some deleted scenes in the home video featurettes. But with Justice League, we are actually able to watch and compare two vastly different versions of the same story. The closest instance we had was the underrated Mel Gibson crime drama Payback, where writer-director Brian Helgeland was able to recut his original version 7 years after its release, where the second half of the film is completely different from what was released theatrically in 1999. Visually, the biggest differences between Snyder and Whedon's version are the aspect ratio and color grade. While the theatrical cut was in widescreen 1.78 by 1, the re-release is in the old-school 1.33 by 1 square frame. This is meant to give more verticality to the picture, the heroes occupying most of the frame when standing tall, but it also more clearly distinguishes the two versions if you put them side by side. The colors are also very different, as Snyder implemented his trademark desaturated, high-contrast look, while Whedon dialed up the saturation to the point of making some dark scenes look flat. The lighting in general in his scenes feels overproduced and too straightforward, taking away from the drama of the scenes in favor of a more standard aesthetic that many films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe employed, including Whedon's own Avengers films. Just look at the difference between these two scenes of Lois Lane and Martha Kent talking. The cinematography drastically changes the mood of their interaction. The Whedon version has many more comedic scenes and lines that simply do not mesh well with the previous films in the cinematic universe, often feeling completely out of character, like when Superman talks to Batman after his resurrection to make a cheap reference to a scene in Batman v Superman.
Tell me. Do you bleed?
Many of the character introductions were changed for the worse, especially Batman's, while Ray Fisher got it worse than everyone else. The character of Cyborg is the heart and soul of Zack Snyder's Justice League, and to see him lose his entire emotional arc just to be put on the sideline is heartbreaking, to say the least. Virtually all of his scenes were reshot, ultimately making him a forgettable character, when he was actually the most compelling one in the whole film. Analyzing the two cuts of Justice League makes for one of the more surprisingly complex discussions about the craft of filmmaking. While it is easy to make fun of his over-the-top, bloated style of directing, there is no denying that Zack Snyder is an auteur. He has had a consistent style since Dawn of the Dead and 300, and he often comes back to themes about heroes' worship, the difference between gods and men, the noble sacrifices that humans make in a time of need, and the importance of symbols to help humanity through their darkest times. There is clear authorial intent in his films, more apparently in his version of Justice League, continuing a consistent narrative that he started back in 2013 with Man of Steel. There is no denying that both that film and Batman v Superman a couple years later were not well received, regardless of how passionate their fans may be, but it was still the unadulterated version of Snyder's vision. By stealthily removing him from Justice League and bringing the director who brought together the Avengers for the first time, Warner Brothers likely thought that they were going to have a certified, crowd-pleasing success on their hands. Instead, they got something much worse. An inconsistent, tonally messy, visually ugly, and narratively chaotic superhero team-up. That is much worse than seeing the failed vision of an ambitious filmmaker. And actually witnessing what Snyder originally intended makes it even more baffling that the studios agreed to many of the changes that Whedon brought up to the table, showing just how clueless they can be when it comes to storytelling and what audiences truly want from this type of film. Of course, Zack Snyder's Justice League is far from a perfect film, as its villains still aren't anything particularly unique, even if Steppenwolf has more layers than in 2017. The longer action scenes are a bit drawn out, some of the CGI is still very dodgy, and the last 20 minutes are completely unnecessary and overindulgent. There is still a lesson to be learned from this, however, even if it is unlikely that studio heads will pick it up. Trust the filmmakers with their vision, regardless of how insane and hedonistic they might be, because they have a vision that they are passionate about, and that will be much more interesting than if it gets diluted to please the masses. In almost a century of director's cuts being released, there is virtually no instance of any of them being worse or weaker than what was originally screened theatrically. Artistic integrity is more important than short-term monetary gain, and that is something that we should always keep in mind when watching the next cookie-cutter studio release where a director lost their voice. Thank you for watching this video. Let me know down in the comments below what you think of Zack Snyder's Justice League, and tell me what are some of your favorite director's cuts. Thank you for watching, remember to subscribe to the channel, leave a like, and if you can, support us on Patreon. The links are in the description. And I will see you in the next video.